Former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence offered his most forceful rebuke to date of his one-time boss, Donald Trump, saying that history will hold him accountable for his role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. On Saturday night, Pence told assembled journalists and their guests at the Gridiron Dinner, an annual white tie event in Washington, D.C., that President Trump was wrong, adding, quote, "I had no right to overturn the election, and his reckless words endangered my family and everyone at the Capitol that day." Pence was in the Capitol when thousands of Trump supporters breached the building in an attempt to stop Congress from certifying the results of the 2020 presidential election, which Trump lost to Joe Biden. Throughout the siege, Trump sent out several tweets, one calling on Republicans to fight, and others making false claims of voter fraud. He also criticized Pence for certifying the results. Pence, who was whisked to safety by law enforcement during the attack, is now considering a run for the Republican nomination for the 2024 presidential election. He would be up against Trump, who has already thrown his hat back into the ring. In the months following the incident, Pence rarely addressed January 6th, but has since upped his criticism of the rioters and the behavior of his former boss that day. His remarks Saturday came just days after conservative television host Tucker Carlson aired security footage of the Capitol attack, claiming that many of the rioters were orderly, a depiction that was sharply criticized by Democrats and several high-profile Republicans in the Senate.
Around midnight last night, there was a 911 call that came in. Lifeguards, Border Patrol, and Coast Guard were dispatched. We went to Black's Beach. We launched the Coast Guard helicopter and a Coast Guard small boat. The result is we found one panga made it to shore with approximately 8 people on board. The second panga with 15 overturned in the surf. This is not necessarily people trying to find a better life. This is part of a transnational criminal organization effort to smuggle people into the United States. These people are often labor trafficked and sex trafficked when they arrive.
This is one of the worst maritime smuggling tragedies that I can think of in California, certainly here in the city of San Diego. When we arrived on scene, both vessels were capsized and inside the shoreline. That area is a very hazardous area, even in the daytime. It has a series of sandbars and inshore rip currents. So you could think that you could land in some sand or get to waist-high, knee-high water and think that you're safe and you'll be able to exit the water, but there's long inshore holes. So if you step into those holes, those rip currents will pull you along the shore and then back out to sea.
The French Senate on Saturday night adopted President Emmanuel Macron's unpopular pension reform plan. That in the wake of a 7th day of demonstrations that were not as large as authorities had expected. 195 members of the French Parliament's upper house voted for the text, whose key measure is raising the retirement age by 2 years to 64. 112 voted against. The protests and rolling strikes that have affected refineries, public transport and garbage collections aim to pressure the government to withdraw the pension plan. But the government believes the change is essential to ensure the pension system does not run out of money. Now that the Senate has adopted the bill, it will be reviewed by a joint committee of lower and upper house lawmakers, likely on Wednesday, when an additional day of nationwide strikes and protests are planned. Providing the committee agrees on a text, a final vote in both chambers will take place. If the government fears it won't have enough votes in the lower house, where Macron's party still needs allies' votes for a majority, it's still possible they could push the text through without a parliamentary vote.
At that time, I just felt as if my whole world had ended.
Stranded in Turkey, Sayabonga Twala reflects on being barred entry to Britain over 2 months ago. On Saturday, he spent his 34th birthday away from his family in an unfamiliar city. Twala holds South African citizenship, but has lived in the UK since 2004 and is a father to a British son. On December 29th, he was flying back to Britain after a trip to South Africa with his parents, son, and 2 siblings, but Twala was stopped from boarding the plane in Istanbul.
They just pulled me to one side and they said, we've been informed that we can't board you today. And they gave me a letter with the email and the phone number on it, and that was That was all they could tell me at that time.
He had not seen the deportation order, but says it was related to a conviction for possession of cannabis with an intent to supply. In 2018, he was sentenced to 9 months in prison, for which he served 4.5 months.
I just felt as if I'd just committed maybe another crime or something, like I'm being sort of sentenced to another prison sentence on top of what I've already served.
Twala, who has a residence permit in the UK, appealed to documents that said he was liable for deportation. His appeal was unsuccessful, but he continues to fight the deportation decision through the Home Office.
That if they come here illegally, it will result in their detention and swift removal.
This comes at a time when the British government's immigration policy faces global scrutiny, after new plans to bar the entry of asylum seekers who arrive in the country on small boats across the English Channel. Lawyers and charities said the plans would breach the United Nations Convention on Refugees. Twala's representative was told by the Home Office that he had left the country voluntarily. The UK Home Office has not responded to a request for comment Reuters made on Saturday. Twala even tried to go to the British Embassy in Ankara, but was turned away.
I turned up to the embassy, and obviously, before I could even see anyone, the security at the gate just said to me, we're not gonna let you in because your appointment is invalid and you're not a British citizen. But I tried to obviously tell them that, look, I've got a visa essentially, and that visa is a UK visa, and it's an ongoing visa.
He remains in an unfamiliar country, away from his family. He says the UK is his home and will have nowhere to go if he's not allowed to return.